All right, and welcome back to Open Your Eyes, and we're now moving into our second conversation for the morning. Now, it is, of course, today being celebrated as Earth Day, and we also will be chit-chatting about the Placencia Ambition Forum. Now, what that is, we'll be telling you about it in just a few. We've got online is Carlos Fuller, who is the International and Regional Liaison Officer for Caribbean Community Climate Change Center. Mr. Fuller, good morning, sir.
Good morning. It's a pleasure being here with you this morning, although I can't be there in person.
Well, I tell you what, it's nice to have you, definitely, and it's always nice to hear from you. Firstly, for me, we're listening to, or we're looking at it, Placencia Ambition Forum. I would like to know, what is that?
Well, thank you for the question and allowing me to expand upon it. So, first of all, Belize is the chair of the Alliance of Small Island States. So Belize speaks on behalf of 44 small island states from around the world: the Caribbean, the Pacific, the African small island states, and the Indian Ocean, and also even Singapore. So in the negotiation process, Belize then speaks on behalf of all these 44 countries once you've got them to all agree on a certain subject. Now, during the year, besides having the formal negotiating sessions in Bonn and at the COP, we also have very focused meetings to try to explore further the issues that are going to be related to the negotiations and what could be stumbling blocks along the way. We speak more in an informal manner. And over the years, we normally have, for example, the Brazil-Japan meeting held every year in Japan. There is the Petersburg Dialogue organized by Germany. There is the MOCA conference. The pre-COP is held in a different country. And we always respond to these meetings. Small island states have never said, well, let us set the agenda for one of these meetings. And that is what Belize is doing this year. We said, wait a minute, this is the year of ambition. We want to set the agenda for this year. And so we came up with this idea of having this Placencia Ambition Forum, which would have been held this week in Placencia, a major meeting involving some 150 participants from around the world.
Wow.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we had this pandemic, and we said this will not hinder us. Let us then launch the first virtual meeting on climate change. And in fact, others are going to emulate us. Next week, the Petersburg Dialogue will occur from Berlin, but will be a virtual meeting also.
Yeah, I think as much as I want to talk about what's actually happening with the forum, what you're doing in terms of hosting it virtually is actually really great. We've seen a lot of postponements and cancellations of conferences, but instead, Belize, as the chair of AOSIS, decided to host this completely virtually. And you've had participation by everyone as well?
Yes, we had fantastic participation. So at the opening session, while there were some live presentations, for example, by Minister Figueroa, we also had some taped messages from Prime Minister Barrow, the UN Secretary General, Antonio Gutierrez, the Executive Secretary of the Climate Change Convention, Ambassador formerly from Mexico, the former foreign minister. So we had some major presentations from these high-level dignitaries. And thereafter, after we had that global opening plenary, we then broke into two regional sessions, one for the Caribbean and Pacific, and one for the Indian Ocean and the African countries. And there we had then 4 breakout groups addressing energy, transport, adaptation, and finance. And those attracted some 500 participants.
Wow.
So indeed, we had in fact, more people attended the virtual meeting than if we had it in Placencia itself.
That's amazing. Now, just the theme of it alone, the Ambition Forum, I think perhaps putting it into context when we're talking about climate action, what we're going to do to reduce the effects of climate change that we've seen so far, and also ensuring that we're working towards having more greener societies. Where does ambition fall within all of this?
Well, indeed, 2020 was the year, according to the Paris Agreement, where countries were to submit enhanced NDCs, these nationally determined contributions.
Yeah.
Prior to Paris, countries made these intended NDCs. And when we did the amalgamation of them, we realized that it had us on a trajectory more towards 3 degrees Celsius as opposed to as far below 2 degrees Celsius as possible, aiming for 1.5. Yeah. So the decision which adopted the Paris Agreement said, hold on, in 2020, we want all countries to revisit their NDCs and submit it for COP26 at the end of 2020. As AOSIS, we realized we could not wait until the end of the year to see these NDCs. So let us have this year as the year of ambition. Let us put some milestones along the way where countries can report on where they are with these new NDCs. So in fact, in Placencia, this is where we see the first of these NDCs coming in. So about 10 of these enhanced NDCs have come in already, and throughout the year, we'll have these different milestones where we see these new NDCs coming in. So this is the year of ambition for us, and we launched it.
And so it means that we must aim for the ultimate goal, which is getting the reduction of the emissions to the lowest that it possibly can. Now, we can't miss the opportunity to talk about the context of what we're in right now. There's been so much talk of the reduction of emissions across the globe because people are simply not moving. Some of it has been inflated stories and mistruths, but some of it is actually real. Let's talk about what we are seeing. The pandemic is the first ever test we've had of what happens to our Earth when people are just within their homes.
Absolutely. So the demand for energy dropped tremendously, and so besides not having land, air, and sea transport, we are also not using energy in industry, which is the biggest area that is now that people don't realize. In fact, factories are closed down, and so we are not emitting those. We're not having those emissions. Cement production produces a lot of carbon dioxide also. So we're seeing a significant decline there. Agriculture is shut down, so the machinery for harvesting is not occurring. So all these things have indeed come to a halt. Yeah. However, an area of major concern is as a result of the drought in Australia, emissions actually went up last year because of the burning of their forests. Yes. And we are now seeing in Central America many forest fires. So emissions from land use is indeed increasing because of the droughts and because of the forest fires occurring around the world. So while we're seeing a major decrease from the energy sector, in the land use sector, we're seeing an increase there.
So, but what are we, it's a great test experiment in terms of just looking at how realistic the goals are of the Paris Agreement in being able to reduce emissions. What are the major takeaways so far?
Well, indeed, what we said, this is the perfect time to do a reset. There is no reason why, as we sit here at our desks, we cannot look at our transport sector to say, what policy measures can we put in place when we resume transportation? Should we go back to the old, inefficient modes of transportation? Or can we now devise a system which is not only good for the environment, but good for all of us for safety purposes, efficiency? We know many times people are just waiting around for a bus to come without a good schedule in place. So this is the time we can put in the proper policies in place and then do the policing necessary to ensure those are carried out. In addition, we know that the price of fuel is extremely low right now. However, as soon as the demand goes up again, we know how prices will rebound tremendously and go back up, possibly above the $100 per barrel we were seeing in the last decade. Yeah. So again, can we be efficient now in how our energy systems are used both for heating and cooling our homes, both for industry, because at the end of the day, it is a cost-saving measure, not only good for the environment, but good for the bottom dollar.
Absolutely. Now, you said yesterday there were regional breakouts, and one of the things that we must be able to highlight is the opportunity that comes from Belize being the chair of AOSIS. It really gives us an opportunity to have our voice be heard and be very loud in the conversation based on the impacts that we may feel from climate change. Talk to us about that particular discussion.
Indeed, it is regrettable that we could not actually be in Placencia itself.
No.
However, yes, so however, to make up for it, as we launch the closing plenary this evening, this morning actually, in about an hour's time, we'll actually we'll run a short video of maybe 3 or 4 minutes showing what they are missing from Placencia. So we really wanted to showcase the vulnerability of small island states, the Placencia Peninsula, areas like Monkey River, our offshore islands, the coral reefs, which are being affected by bleaching and all of those effects. We wanted to show what we have to offer and what is at risk for us. Yeah. As you know, in fact, I think we showed that this pandemic is affecting like 65% of our economy is based on tourism. Yeah. So this is what is at risk, not only for Belize, but for many small islands, states around the world, where our biggest source of economy comes from the tourism sector. Yeah. And if our attractions go, not only because of COVID, but because of climate change, if these are affected indeed, then our livelihoods are at risk. And even for some countries, their existence will no longer be there. Kiribati, for example, in the Pacific, will disappear if sea levels were to rise by some 4 or 5 feet. Yeah. So indeed, populations are going to be at risk, and we will be seeing much more migration than we're seeing right now, already from North Africa, already from Central America, which is exacerbated not only by violence, but also by climate change, as the crops are unable to be grown in these drought conditions. So this is what we wanted to showcase to the world, what was at risk and what would happen if indeed we don't do something immediately to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, which we know we have to cut emissions by 50% by 2030 if that is to occur, and to become carbon neutral by 2050. And I must say, one of the big takeaways that Prime Minister Barrow made in his opening statement on Monday was Belize aims to go carbon negative by 2050, meaning we will be absorbing more carbon dioxide than we are actually emitting.
Wow. I just wanted to know if the goal is actually reachable. There are a lot of people who are actually following what's going on, especially in light of COVID-19 and how pollution is actually like it's coming to not necessarily a halt, but it's slowing down in different parts of the world. Are these goals reachable in terms of where we're setting them?
Absolutely, we think they are. It is just a matter of having to put the political will and to remove some of those incentives where some governments are actually propping up their shale industry in the U.S., propping up their production of petroleum in some countries. And we saw that big war with Saudi Arabia and Russia trying to outcompete each other, flooding the markets so that they can force another country out of the market. So these are the perverse incentives that countries must address. And this is where we have to bring them to task to say, wait a minute, you are doing something to limit your to address your economies, and in some countries, and I want to give you an example of what they did to help their countries. Yeah. If you look back at London in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, at the east coast of the US, at California, back in those days, they had tremendous issues of smog, and it was caused by emissions of particulates from their industries. So they realized it was bad for their health. So what they did was not cut down their emissions of carbon dioxide, but they cut down the particulate matter, so they cleaned their atmosphere around their countries. But we continue to suffer because CO2, which you cannot see, continue to be spewed from these factories, and even more so. So we're saying, wait a minute, you cannot address only your local problems that you're creating. You must also solve the global problem that you're also creating. And you're affecting 90% of the population to assist maybe only 10% of the world.
Wow.
Yeah, and you have to help cover some of the costs for the mitigation and the adaptation. That's also a big issue.
Absolutely. And so this is something we have to address. It's interesting to know that I don't know if you saw that I think it is Germany and I think a state in the US is now suing China for the pandemic, saying, wait a minute, you caused this problem and we're having to pay the cost, so we're suing them. Can't we do the same thing for all the countries that emitted carbon dioxide since 1800? Maybe we need to do the same thing.
Yeah, these sound like some very spirited sessions taking place online. But let me come back to another thing. So, in terms of the engagement and commitments that have been made so far, we can look at this moment and say, look, we've reduced some emissions. We still see where land use is a problem. But let's look at what is the more likely scenario. When the world is allowed to move again and airlines are taking off and factories start back up and people jump in their cars and start moving, you're going to go from a historic decline to just a sharp rise immediately. And any commitment from any country at this time would perhaps be hard to bargain because everybody just wants to hit that reset button on their economy. How do you plan for that when you know that it's going to be more important that people are able to recover from the health crisis rather than thinking of things like climate change?
Oh, absolutely. But I would like to use the analogy of an article I saw from Africa, from a poor person from Ghana said, look, I can either starve to death or die from COVID, but I need to eat first. Yeah. So, and so I think we also need to use that same analogy. Hang on a second. Yes, we need to rebound, for example, in Belize, our tourism sector. However, there is no reason why we should be having our air conditioning all the way down to 65 degrees Celsius and then go outside into this hot area. Let us make our buildings energy efficient, reduce our dependence on fossil fuels. For small island states, there is no reason why we should be expending 70% of our foreign exchange to buy petroleum products, while we can use our own indigenous sources of energy, which include wind, biomass, solar power, all of those things. We said, let us make that long investment. It's going to be more difficult now, obviously, because a lot of the funding now is going to be used towards recovering our sectors that are now collapsing. But obviously, when you make the long-term commitment, let's not make the same mistake and then have to pay 10 times more when you have to change it again. So if we were going to change any issue, let's make it green. And in fact, many countries, and we heard it in the breakout groups, are saying, when we reset the economy, we're going to set it towards a green path. There is no reason to go back to the black path that we had before.
We always look at other countries and use what they do as an example. And it's so nice that you mentioned being energy efficient, especially in terms of building your home so it could be much more cooler. Are there any countries we're looking at too we could follow a model from that country and how successful that is?
Well, in fact, there are some good examples that we can use from not too far away. And one of them I would like to highlight is Bermuda. Bermuda, as you know, is a rock in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, subject to many hurricanes during each year.
And missing ships.
Exactly. And they have built their homes to ensure that they are now resilient to hurricanes, so they don't have to be rebuilding. They also don't have any rivers, so they are using their roofs to capture the rainfall, as we did many years ago. So indeed, they are making their country much more resilient. In fact, they are moving also to the use of electric vehicles, so they don't have to import as much petroleum as before for their mobile transport. That is how we need to move. And we have the additional advantage that we have biomass. We have our sugar industry that is now producing electricity. We are looking at other forms of biomass to feed into the turbines at Libertad, indeed, to run electricity. So we have other areas that we can use to generate electricity and to drive our transport.
Mr. Fuller, many advocates at this time have been using the COVID-19 pandemic and the talk of flattening the curve as kind of an analogy as to what needs to happen for climate change as well. In making use of the opportunity of the attention that people have on this particular crisis, how do you liken the two issues, how we're addressing the pandemic and how perhaps in some ways we have to treat the climate crisis as a pandemic as well?
Indeed, and this is where the young people in the streets for the past 2 years have saying we now have a climate emergency. Yeah. It is no longer something way out into the future. They are seeing the issues now, and they are making their voices heard. And those are the voices that we brought into the Placencia Forum, indeed, to say, look, we kept saying, oh, this is something for 2100. But the young people are saying, wait a minute now, we are seeing it already. We in the Caribbean are seeing it. The Bahamas felt it last year. 2 years before that, it was Dominica and Barbuda with these intense events. Hurricane Harold just devastated Fiji a week or so ago. So indeed, they're seeing these issues already. And so we have to address it now. Indeed, the world actually responded nationally, not so much internationally for the COVID crisis. And so we have to take this national action now among all of us, but then we also have to have international cooperation. We cannot allow one country to decide, well, the rest of the world can do the work while we will not be doing anything about it. And so we need to get also those countries who look at their economies more than the planetary emergency and get them to address the issues of their emissions of greenhouse gases also.
So today the Placencia Ambition Forum closes off. What's going to be the next step after this?
Yes, so we close today with some messages. I do a recap of what the roundtables discussed, and then we have some high-level messages that are going to be delivered by Minister Figueroa, and we'll be having a declaration, and these will be handed over to the incoming COP presidency from the UK and his champion, Nigel Topping. So in fact, the Minister of State of the Environment will be present at this closing plenary to receive the message to say, this is what we are providing to you to take forward. Also, there will be the host of the pre-COP, the Minister of Italy will also be receiving the message, and the Minister of Germany, who will be hosting the Petersburg Dialogue, will be taking these messages, the outcomes, to then continue working on it. Minister Figueroa and I will also attend virtually the Petersburg Dialogue next week to reiterate the message so that if anything slips along the way, we will plug those gaps to make sure that the message continues, not only to the Petersburg Dialogue. We then have the New York Climate Week, the UN Climate Week in New York in September. And then as other meetings come up, again, insisting that others continue building on what we started here this week.
All right.
Okay. Well, it's great to know. I would say that this is happening down south, but in fact, it's happening all around us with the virtual forums. But clearly, you've been very effective in being able to maintain your objectives for this forum. Unfortunately, we don't have these people traveling to Placencia, but at least the silver lining is it's less emission from all the flights coming this way, right?
Please log on to the Placencia Ambition Forum. It's going to be live streamed on the IOSIS website, and you can actually see the presentations and how this last session go, which will last about, I think, about an hour.
All right.
Well, thank you very much, and best of luck today.
Thank you very much for having me, Marlene.
All right. There you have it, you know.
Yeah.
The Placencia Ambition Forum. I love that Belize took the lead instead of postponing or canceling, that they just decided, well, let's do what everybody else is doing around the world. Get online and keep things going.
But it's so nice to see the transition and how things can be of norm at this particular point. Now you don't have to go to a country, you could actually do this virtually, and so many people can take place at this one time. But Belize at this point taking the lead in that.
Yeah. And one of the things I think that it just reminds us is that, well, right now our focus is on COVID-19, and it should be. There's still all the other issues that were there before that people are working behind the scenes to be able to address. And so we know the conversations continue with climate action, and getting people to keep to the commitments that they have made about reducing the emissions across the globe.
Definitely. Remember, we're all in this together. We need to do our part.
That's right.
All right, so we're about to take that break, but when we come back, we'll be sliding into a conversation of must watch for Netflix and YouTube. We'll tell you more when we come back. Stay tuned.